I am joined today by an individual who is, well, I mean, you are an actress. You're someone who I would consider to be quite enlightened. You are a teacher. You are a Buddhist as well. There's so many different elements to you, and that's not even giving you justice there. So I'm very pleased to announce is Radhika. I forgot to ask how you pronounce your surname. Is it Rao?
Yes, it's Radhika Rao.
Radhika.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
I normally ask beforehand, but I was too confident
Oh,
in myself.
no
But
worries.
welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining. And anything you want to say about yourself before we get going, if I didn't already tackle some things?
No, I live in San Francisco. I moved to the US, United States, when I was in my mid-20s. And I work as a theater artist, and I integrate theater in different learning situations.
It's amazing. Yeah, because you've done a lot of information about improv, and I really encourage people to go to your website, which I'll include a link in the description. But there are so many almost nuggets, like clips you could take from either interviews you've done or on your website, where it's just like profound, brilliant bits of knowledge. So when I was introduced to you via our mutual friend Tonya Todd, I was very intrigued because I was like, oh, Buddhism is something specifically that has intrigued me quite a lot. So before we sort of delve into Buddhism, I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself growing up in India. And I suspect this is going to tie in with Buddhism quite a lot as well, due to obviously the country's culture. So you grew up in India and obviously you moved over here. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your life in India and potentially, if you're willing to share, why you moved to the US and how that potentially interlinks with Buddhism in any way you so please.
It has very much to do with Buddhism. So I was actually born in the Netherlands.
Oh,
My dad used to work in Philips Eindhoven, so I was, born there, and lived there for 4.5 years. Apparently, I used to speak fluent Dutch, um, and I even use some cuss words in Dutch. That's what my mother tells me. So I had a potty mouth, even when I was a kid, apparently. But when I was 4.5, I think my parents, that was before that predated the EU. So we're talking 1977 to 1981. And so there was, it really didn't make sense. My parents didn't grasp what Europe was going to become. And they both wanted to go back to India and raise us, in India. So when I was 4.5, we moved back, and then the Hindi erased the Dutch. Apparently, I did learn German in high school, and it pretty easily. So I wonder if it had anything to do with it. And I think that if I was hypnotized, maybe I'd speak Dutch. I don't know. But and then I was raised in India, and by fairly liberal parents. I actually didn't realize that my parents were that liberal until I was much later in life, like in my 20s, and I realized, like, wow, a lot of my Indian friends didn't have a lot of freedoms that my sister and I had. But education was very important to my parents, and marriage was not. So, which is like, marriage is very big in India, and so I was I was raised in the Indian educational system, which is pretty rigorous and a lot of standardized testing. And some of it comes from the British system, but some of it has just become its own beast.
sorry.
You know what? I mean, yeah, but I think we made it more miserable than the British could ever have imagined it to be. I was really good at school, but you know what? I managed to be, I had two experiences of being in plays. One was in elementary school, one was in primary school when I was in the 4th grade. And I think I played this like evil minister, and it was that, that time that, you lose your front teeth. So I was even more evil because I didn't have teeth, I didn't have front teeth. And I ended up getting some kind of supporting actor award by the end of it. They had to make up an award because apparently I was impressive. Um, and then the other chance I got was when I was in high school, and our school just did a one-off production of Andrew Lloyd Webber's Starlight Express, which is also just so random. And otherwise, there was no opportunities for the arts. I learned the guitar a bit, but there wasn't any opportunity. And I just knew through those two experiences that I really wanted to act, or that I wanted to perform and express myself. And I think things at home weren't that great, you know. I don't think that I don't know. I don't think I was a happy kid. You know, I don't think I was unhappy, but I wasn't happy. So the idea of like entering other characters was just exciting. And I'd often say dialogue in my head. So I think I had that dream. But so when I was in college in India, I went to a women's college. I got to really take part in like what we call a dramatics club, dramatic society club. And I became the president of that club. And, I decided that after my undergraduate, I am not going to go for postgraduate studies and a master's, which in India, if you grow up in like a middle class, upper middle class, like background, like upper caste, whatever, where education is valued, it's like horrible. Like, wow, it's almost like I'm not going to go to college, or I'm not going to get my, high school degree. So, but I said, this is what I want to do. I want to do theater. And there was one big nationally run theater company, and I didn't get into it. I didn't get into it. And then I started apprenticing with another company. But it was really hard. And actors can be really messed up. And the whole theater company was a toxic work culture. And I didn't have any survival skills. So I fell into kind of a depression, which I didn't realize. I think now that was like, early 2000s in India. If it was now, I think I might have been diagnosed with low-grade depression. And it was at that time that one of my really good friends that I'd known from college walked into the same environment, and she was not impacted by it the way I was. And I knew she was a practicing Buddhist. She'd actually been talking to me about Buddhism, for 2 years. And I'd be like, yeah, it's fine. But, she had pretty much manifested whatever she needed to manifest. And she just looked happy. And she had survived like this terrible, like a strain of malaria that was really rampant in Delhi at that time, brain malaria, and six people had died or something. And she was the only person who didn't die.
Wow.
And then she ended up like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Monsoon Wedding, but she's in Monsoon Wedding. Like
that's cool.
It's a really famous movie, and she got a part in that. But I just noticed that the people that were abusive towards me in the workplace treated her really well, and that she was able to get the best out of that, environment, and somehow was weighing me down. So I knew that there's something going on with her Buddhist practice. And on one like really sad day, I was in the bathroom crying. I forget why I was crying. I was like, you got to take me to a Buddhist meeting, And that's how like I started practicing Buddhism. And it involves this chant, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And the organization is called the Soka Gakkai International. And for those of your listeners who watch Bridgerton, one of the actors on Bridgerton, the middle daughter, I forget, the feisty one, the one that is, she practices SGI. So it's an incredible practice that asks you a question, like, what's your mission in life? Like, and says that, Buddhism says that we're all born, with a purpose, and there are lessons that we're meant to learn in this life. And we all have a unique mission that only we can fulfill. So when we awaken to that mission, like yours might be, these conversations and podcasting, and no one can do what you do because you're unique. And so I started asking myself that question, and it's a very long story, but out of that kind of spiritual search, I got opportunities to teach and realized that that I'm passionate about peace building. India is a very multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious place, but it's not often peaceful. And people are fighting each other, and that I wanted to be part of the peace building process in the world in general, make the world a better place. But the way I wanted to do it was through performing arts and theater, and through education. And there were these three facets of my life: performance, teaching, and peace building, that I wanted to bring together. And I used to think there were different things that couldn't coexist, but Buddhism enabled me to, do that. And we call it a benefit in Buddhism, that you have benefits when you start chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And my benefit was to was to get into the Harvard School of Education, Harvard University School of Education. And I applied to 5 or 6 schools, and I got rejected by all but Harvard. So I had to go to Harvard.
Wow.
And that's how I came to America to study how theater could be used in like peace building.
Wow.
So,
that's an incredible story. It's one of those things where things come out in strange places. It's like with myself, like we were speaking before I pressed record, it was, podcasting for me is my passion. I've done bits and pieces before. As I said, I've done a YouTube show. I did music videos and stuff. And I'd worked previously, a few years ago, where my sort of first proper job in air quotes, was for 5 years at a place that creates CDs and cassette tapes. So this was only 5-6 years ago I left there, so they're still going. But I did a lot of graphic design there. And in the graphic design and also with the production of the CDs, you had to do a degree of mastering. So I had a little bit of knowledge of audio. I had a lot of stuff to do with visual and graphic design, and I did a bit of media in college, which would be like late high school. College here is when you're like 16 to 18, so it's not actually university college. So I'm not quite that high. I didn't go to uni/college for yourselves, but basically like the tail end of high school, I did media studies and things. And so all of it kind of intrigued me. So when I got into podcasting, I was like, I've got all these skills that seem to all kind of work. And I was like, that kind of pushed me and made me kind of realize, like, reaffirmed myself in what I wanted to do. And I imagine that you found something like this, which is whenever things have become tough when it comes to either your teaching or your performances or things like that, and you have that moment of doubt, or you think, oh, maybe I'm not doing the right thing. Maybe this isn't the path. And then you have normally that day or the next day or really close to that happening, something will happen and it'll be like, oh no, this is definitely it. With me podcasting, I'm like, should I stop? And then the next day I'll get a really nice message from someone or a comment or something. Maybe I should say that on every podcast, that I'll stop podcasting and loads of people flood me with nice comments. But it's that kind of thing. So I wonder if with yourself, when you've been teaching in that, you maybe have those moments where you self-doubt, but the universe in a way kind of shows you, no, you are on the right path, even if every day doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, I so relate to that so much. And I think I spent I feel like I'm just easing into not doubting myself as much, but I think doubt is part of like just human life. And I think doubt also has prevented me from being arrogant, and just being like, and it helps me grow. But in Buddhism, we talk about harboring doubt, like don't harbor it for too long. It's important because it's teaching you something. And one of the things which I think I relate to you is I'm good at different things, or I'm very curious, or I'll dabble in different things, but then I won't become a master of anything. So like jack of all trades, master of none. And I just had a negative view about that, that's just not a good thing. I'm not great at anything. And I realized that no, it's actually that I'm curious and I know a little bit about everything, and that's who I am. And when the time comes, sure, I can master something, but I just don't have a one-track kind of personality. And they're talking about that a lot now. They're calling it hybrid professionals and people that, I guess that's how Renaissance people were, right? Like that people did many things, and you could be into science and art at the same time, and, religion and science at the same time. And so I definitely feel that, that I'm acknowledging my uniqueness more. And that is that, I don't just do one thing great. I do a lot of little things. And I love that. I get bored. I don't know about you, but I get bored doing, if I have to do the same thing again and again, which is why I'm like a freelancer, and I like working for myself and doing different projects. And I imagine you like interviewing different kinds of people.
Yeah. 100%. And also one of your other passions, which links in with your teaching and the acting, is more specifically improv. And it's an interesting thing that when I first heard, when you first hear improv and then Buddhism, you may initially go, oh, you don't connect those dots initially. But I think improv, boiled down to its core, is just thinking on your feet. That's really what it is at its core. So it's just like adapting to situations, whether or not you're trying to be funny to someone, or you're trying to make them think, or however you want the improvisation to go. It's all just about thrown in the deep end. Just kind of vaguely figure it out. You know, you won't get berated for not knowing. You just got to try things and just try, kind of almost let the universe guide you in a certain way. You know, let whatever you kind of feeling, you've got that random thought, just say it, bring it out. So I wonder if you could talk about sort of your love of improv and if and how that's affected your relationship with Buddhism at all.
Absolutely. I started improv in really seriously in San Diego, and I'd graduated from Harvard, and I wanted to get into acting in San Diego, and I wasn't getting any parts because I think at that time, I don't know what it's like right now in San Diego, but in 2010, like they had barely discovered Black people on stage, you know, so they were like, oh, every show is going to have one Black person. And so I was like, oh gosh, by the time it comes to like an Indian actor with an accent, you know, it's going to be 2050. So I just couldn't. I mean, I auditioned, but I didn't really get any parts. But what I discovered there was improv, and in improv, you can play any part. Improv is you're writing, you're directing, and you're acting yourself. Like it's all like it's everything. And you get to, it's so delightful because if you have the courage to do improv, because nothing is scripted, you get to play 8 characters in a day, as opposed to like, you know, you play 1 character, maximum 2 or 3 in a scripted play. So I got into improv, and I could, you know, not only be myself, but I could be other people. And that was so liberating, or other things, or other animals, and make up these stories. And I was a Buddhist at that time, and I had been a Buddhist for like 10 or 11 years. But what I didn't realize was how aligned improv was with Buddhism. And improv is based on a concept of yes and, you know, and, you know, and I once saw this little like funny like meme thing where they said, you know, it was all about like different religions, and some religions are like, why did this shit happen? Or like, this shit is not fair. And Buddhism says shit happens, you know? And Buddhism just says, it is what it is. Now, how are you going to create value out of it? And improv does the same thing. It says, whatever your scene partner told you, whatever audience suggestion you get, even if you think it's a terrible suggestion, it's your responsibility to, you know, to make something beautiful out of it. And so, but practicing that improv gave me the opportunity to practice that. And I realized that even though I had been chanting and practicing Buddhism, that was very judgmental of certain things. Like, this is a good choice, this is a bad artistic choice. And I judged myself as well, to the point that I suffered, where I would like, cut myself down. I bombed that audition. But improv says, just take a breath, and this is great. You're there. Like, let's applaud that. And the other thing that improv does is asks you to listen, and you cannot be a good improviser if you don't listen to the other person. And I used to be, and still am, I'm still working on it. I get sometimes so anxious, and I want to do so well that I can't listen to what's happening in front of me, you know? And I just recently had that experience in a solo-ish improv situation, which I want to go back and do, because I wasn't breathing and I wasn't listening. And I think I just wasn't present. It was terrible, you know. But I learned that I actually don't listen, that I could do such a better job of listening to my friends, you know, listening to my family members, really listening and taking a moment to just listen, take it in, and then respond. So being an improviser has helped me be a better Buddhist too, you know. And of course, being a Buddhist helps you improvise, you know. But it's gone both ways. They're very relational. They're very connected to each other. And the other principles of improv are make your partner look good, you know, make your partner look good, and operate at the top of your intelligence, you know, like don't do the easy thing, like, you know, do the challenging, interesting thing. And so that's been really great. Like, yeah, take the road less traveled.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I find like it's one thing as well, which I think from what I understand about Buddhism, which is limited, is that kind of idea that you're always growing, but it is to, as you said earlier, to be the best you can be. If you're going to always compare yourself to, for example, this person over here, you are on completely different trajectories. Even if at times it seemed like you're on the same path, you're not. You know, it's completely different. And I found with podcasting, for example, in having to listen, especially when I'm editing, listening to myself talk with people, especially in the earlier days, I was finding that I was doing the vast majority of the talking, even though I was meant to be having someone on my show to showcase them, but I was talking so much. So in doing podcasting, it has helped me try and rein it back a bit and be more of a listener, as opposed to, you can be someone who's just hearing someone and you vaguely hear what they say, and you probably hear the first few words and the last few words, but realistically, you're just waiting for them to finish talking so you can say what you want to say. And so doing podcasting has really helped me edit myself, is being able to, having to listen to myself talk for hours and hours a week outside of my own, throat and things. It is a very good way, and quite an unpleasant way in certain ways, because a lot of people are like, oh, I hate the sound of my own voice. Like, yeah, I don't like it still, but at least now I know I can kind of trim bits off here and there and kind of self-edit before having to go into that. So what you've been saying there is really intriguing. And with Buddhism itself, what is it? Like with Buddhism, obviously there's no easy way, and there's whole podcasts about like hours and hours of trying to explain Buddhism and those sort of things. But to you as an individual, if someone says, what is Buddhism to you? And be as ambiguous with that question as you want and define it in any way. If someone just said, what's Buddhism to you? How would you answer that question?
Yes. Wow.
You can have a minute. Don't worry. Don't feel rushed.
Yes. I'm just trying to think like with my body here instead of my head, because I could go in a million places. I think for me, because Buddhism is many, 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 many different schools of Buddhism, after the Buddha passed, there were so many things. And, a lot of it is similar, but the Buddhism that I practice, which is with this organization, Soka Gakkai, and it's based on Nichiren Buddhism and the Lotus Sutra, it is a practice. So I was also an atheist, or probably agnostic. I didn't know the difference when I was younger. But I didn't believe in a God or in heaven or hell, or things that were, outside of this realm. I didn't understand it. There was something going on, but I saw a lot of religious people that were real assholes in real life, but would go to temple, right? And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. Or in India, you have all of these priests that are so corrupt, and I'm like, what's the purpose of religion, and yet I needed something to explain the universe. So for me, Buddhism is a practice, and it's a daily practice. And what I do is I sit in front of my altar, and there is a scroll that's called the Gohonzon that represents the enlightenment of human beings, and just says that you are the same force that exists in the universe exists in your heart. And and some people call it God, but Buddhism doesn't really engage in that idea of God, but that we are powerful. And on that scroll are also what we call devilish functions and godly functions. So we're everything. We're good and bad, and we're human. But at the core of it, we're Buddhas. We have the potential, everybody, without exception, has the potential to do what's right and what's life affirming. So every day when I sit in front of my altar, I practice doing what we call our human revolution, which is that I work on myself, on transforming myself, and praying for, of course, things to manifest in my life, because Buddhism will say that earthly desires are enlightenment. So in order for me to do good in this world, I have to also be successful. So we don't say I'm going to detach from something, but as we start chanting, our prayers become bigger and bigger. So I have the capacity to chant for, places that are at war or famine, or the environment is freaking me out right now. So it's a practice of sitting in front of your altar morning and night, expressing gratitude, sharing whatever's in your heart, acknowledging that, chanting for people that you care about, causes that you care about. And then, of course, that's only a few minutes or hours or whatever. And then living that in my daily life, so if I, go to a work environment where I don't like the people I work with, what can I do? How can I recognize their Buddhahood? How can I create value in this situation, show up as the best human being, So, it's the human talk. We call it human revolution, that ultimately world peace is not going to be caused by an economic, social revolution or laws changing. It's when every human being chooses a peaceful option over like a violent option, which is we're just so quick to pick up a gun or cut somebody down. It's a spectrum of violence. Some of us won't ever kill somebody, but we'll cut somebody's Buddhahood or humanity down by saying they're like that, you're like that, this group is like that group is like that, So yeah, that's the issue. So every day, and I'm a human being, so every day I'm like watching my thoughts, words, and deeds. But it's really fun. Buddhism doesn't negate any thought or feeling. Just says, okay, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, it's a very introspective religion of the amount I know about it. With a lot of religions, I've been very critical of Christianity, more so Catholicism, because it's kind of like the less diluted, less liberal version to some degree, and not to criticize any religion over any other religions in particular, but when you have religions such as Islam or Christianity, Catholicism, where you have a bit of doctrine, and then the doctrine is infallible, and then there's certain parts in there that either get interpreted in certain ways or is written or translated God knows how many times to, there's issues entrenched in those religions which take a lot to deal with without people being happy. And it's, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I've never heard I know there have been issues in the past with wars because of people believing in Buddhism and other religions clashing and things, like with many things. But of all the religions, I think that Buddhism is the one I've heard the least amount of, at least modern atrocities of people being unable to do certain things because their religion has constricted it. I'm not... Obviously, I can't speak for everyone who's experienced anyone who is a practicing Buddhist in the many different facets, but I have found it's very much more so about yourself, less so about the rest of the world. It's not about fearing a God who's going to punish you or trying to make this God happy. It's you are all God. You are all a part of this thing. We're all connected. So your kind of role is to be the best you can be so that everyone around you, everyone who's affected by the ripples that you cause in this world, are benefiting as much as possible without it causing detriment to yourself. So is that, when one speaks of enlightenment, is the way that you personally interpret that as being the best you can be while also spreading the most joy, or is it something slightly different?
Yeah. I think so. Yes. And, absolutely. And, and Buddhism, like other religions, also there is violence that has been committed, but very little. Like I think Myanmar is an example where the Buddhist monks, I think, just really violent. So every religion falls prey to that. But I think in the doctrine, there's something, right. Yes. Enlightenment is defined as a state of mind that you can enter at any moment. You can drop into Buddhahood at any time, but it's a state of mind where you're strong, and you're confident and you're compassionate and wise in that moment, and you're free of your environment. And it's something that sometimes you need to experience sometimes what we call an obstacle or difficult time to experience Buddhahood. It's a state where like things around you might be crumbling, but you feel confident because somewhere you understand the meaning of that moment, or when you're going through a hard time and you step out and support somebody else. But it's this state of mind where you're not a victim of your environment, or you're not swayed. We call it swayed by our environment, and so, and it's a feeling where you feel it's a feeling of my life has purpose. But it's not just I, me, and myself. It's very much like a Buddha is always like embracing everybody else. So we're, at least the kind of Buddhism that I practice, we're very engaged. We're the most diverse Buddhist organization in the world. And it's a very interesting organization because it's women are in the majority, and people of color in a majority in America. That may not be the case in every place, but in America, which is the opposite of what it's like in the United States, and that's a real testament to, equality. But everybody is really considered equal, in that sense. But yeah, enlightenment, it's just a feeling of freedom. I don't know how to describe it, but, I've been stressing, as an artist, I stress about money a lot. And a few months ago, I was stressing about money, and and at the same time, I wanted to contribute to an organization, make a difference. I was chanting, and my car had broken down. I was chanting, and what I realized was that I need to feel financially abundant in my heart. Like I somehow feel that I can't attract that, or that that money just doesn't come to me. And I was chanting, and I had this awakening that I've always been protected, and this great feeling of gratitude that where I live in San Francisco. I live in, a first world country. I live near the ocean. I'm like, I can see the ocean from my, bedroom, and that I have never not gotten what I needed at that moment. But at the same time, I feel like I have this poverty mindset, where I'm worrying about my bank account and worrying about what would happen if this apartment that I live in doesn't work out. And I said, I have to change that mindset. In that moment, there was complete freedom. And I just determined I'm going to become the person who can freely give my money, that money will just come and go. And I ended up making that financial contribution that I wanted to make. But guess what? My friend gave me this like personal loan, so I'm not owing a bank, and I was able to get myself a nice hybrid car, which I wanted. There was a COVID rent relief grant that the Californian government was giving out. My roommate and I got like 4 months free rent, but that wasn't the winner for me. The thing was the freedom that I am not my bank account, and that I have the ability to manifest whatever I need in my life, And that's, I feel like, is enlightenment. Like I've been single for 7 years, and I had a really, I think it's just a really painful like divorce, 5 years ago. And I suffered on account of that. And I've been, but this few years of singlehood and really spiritually investigating that, I now feel very enlightened that I know who I am, and I feel like I'm worthy of love. And having grown up in a household where I wasn't confident at all that my parents loved each other, they chose to stay with each other. I didn't have a roadmap of what that looks like. And so somewhere I thought I wasn't worthy of manifesting a relationship. So now I'm at this place where I say, no, I am. I'd like to, and I'm worthy of love. And that for me is enlightenment. That's freedom, because I'm not, even though I haven't manifested that relationship yet, but I know it's coming. So I'm free of fear. I'm free of stress and, worry. And like, that's enlightenment. So life is not, life is suffering, but it doesn't have to be. Actually, the point of Buddhism is that for people to be happy, but that doesn't mean that we don't go through difficult times. It's the symbol of Buddhism is a lotus flower, and the lotus only grows in muddy ponds. It will not grow in clear water. So if you try to grow it, it won't. It'll wilt and die. And it also seeds and blossoms at the same time. So the idea is that the moment you experience a transformation in your heart, the environment has already changed, It manifests at a time when you're ready, but it's changed. And the other thing is that you need the muck of your life. Everything that bothers you, everything that you think is a burden is actually the fuel for you to become happy. That's your superpower. So I just went to a Buddhist conference recently, and I was facilitating and giving, we call it guidance or encouragement, but it's like counsel to, people. And everybody who came to me had problems that I was facing or had faced. And I was able to encourage them because I was going through it. And as I was encouraging them, I said, oh, I'm so glad I went through these really difficult moments that included health, self-esteem, family disharmony, divorce, financial struggle, because now I can encourage somebody else, Like perfect people can't encourage people. But if you've gone through a difficult time, you can say, I went through that, so can you. So that's, I think, the purpose of Buddhism is for all of us to just be human and go through what we need to go through. Actually, Buddhism says we chose to be born with these particular troubles at this particular time, with these particular people, some of whom piss us off. But we chose each other. We chose each other. So that's really cool.
That's beautiful. Yeah. It sounds like to me, your interpretation of enlightenment is almost like, life is painful enough as it is, and you don't need to make you don't need to put your own shackles on yourself. You can take your own chains off and really kind of learn to breathe and have that contentment for the soul. Be content with yourself, by yourself, for a moment to just breathe. And then once you're ready to kind of have the interactions from everything else around the world, that's when you're kind of ready. Because if you're truly content with yourself, then the things the world's going to throw at you won't wound you in the same way. And is what you say about the lotus flower and thing is beautiful, because it's a thing I say it on my podcast all the time, which is my dad passed away when I was 19. So I'm nearly 30 now, so it's going to be about 10 years-ish, thereabouts. He passed away due to cancer. And so I watched him progressively get ill and then die. And it was when I'd finished college and whatnot. And obviously at the time it was very unpleasant to go through, and I dealt with it in a maybe not so healthy way for a while. But what I realized is, after it all happened and things, it was the worst thing that's ever happened to me, but it's the best thing that's ever happened to my character, to my person, because it completely changed my perspective on life and death. It completely changed my perspective on what I want to do with myself. My dad was very successful. He had his own business. He earned a lot of money, but he was always working Monday to Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday, he'd often work a few hours as well. And what I kind of realized is he passed away when he was 63, which is not that old, and he was quite fit as well before he got ill. And so it was one of those things where I was like, I don't want to do what he did. I'd rather have more financial difficulty and not have as much money, but be able to actually live, like really live more. But I know that the reason my dad was like that is because he grew up incredibly poor. He was the oldest of 4 siblings, incredibly poor family, almost no money. As soon as he could, he started working. So his whole mindset was the thing he'd been lacking earlier in his life was money. So he made it assured that no matter what, myself and my mum and things wouldn't have to worry about money in that same regard that he did. And then from when I did that, obviously when I lived through that and I saw that and kind of recognized that, I was like, oh, so what he didn't have when he was young, he's fostered his entire life in a journey around that, trying to heal that wound in a sense. And then from me, I'm kind of trying to learn from his passing, which is a wound from me, and trying to learn, okay, what can I learn from that? What I learn is I don't need to invest my entire life to make money, because at the end of the day, that won't necessarily equate happiness. My dad suffered through that and has done those things. So what can I focus on? Well, I want to focus on my passions. I want to focus on life. Obviously, I have to have a day job, which is part of it, but I'm not, it's a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. I enjoy it. I've got friends there, but it's not, my life isn't about my work. My work is something I have to do for life. I don't hate it, so it's fine where it is, but I get to really focus on the other things that make me that get that fire behind my eyes. So I feel like you're kind of speaking about the lotus flower really connects with me as an individual, because I'm very open about that on my podcast. And I've got a podcast where I spoke to my brother about the passing of my dad, because we have the same dad but different mums. And so I spoke with him about it on one of the earlier podcasts, and I've had people still occasionally today message me and go, just you talking about it in an open, honest way, not saying my dad was never perfect. I never said he was a perfect man. Myself and my brother criticized him, but also cut him some slack. It's that idea. No one is pure good. No one is pure evil, regardless of whether they're alive or not, and that's my perception of what alive truly is also changed a lot and things. And I'm only just realizing it now. And I think it's the first time I've said it on the show, but my dad always said he had a guardian angel, and he actually said it was an Indian gentleman. And there's always someone who is there. And whenever he went through times of struggle or hardship or something, he would always see this. And he was an agnostic. He didn't believe in any religion or anything. He was just kind of like, maybe there's a God, but I've not seen any proof. So who knows? But he always, and he wasn't someone who believed in necessarily in the supernatural or anything that's spiritual. But throughout his whole life, I always remember him talking about a guardian angel who is an Indian gentleman, which is quite an interesting thing. So it's one of those intriguing things that maybe he was channeling Buddhism in some way, or however he was channeling the world in his own way. But I appreciate you elaborating on the lotus flower thing, because I always share that story on the podcast when it's relevant, just bring it out of the bag for no reason. But it is so important.
Our teachers in Buddhism, one of the teachers, his name is Dr. Daisaku Ikeda, and he's a peace activist. He's won peace awards, and he's also a writer. I can give you his name later, but he lost his brother when he in the Second World War. And he started practicing Buddhism when he was 19 years old. So he always talks about 19. But he and his mentor always talk about young people who've been through really difficult moments becoming, that's almost a prerequisite to becoming a capable human being, and sometimes you don't experience difficult times when you're young. And, and so, but that, even though it's deemed unfortunate, like if you look at great people's lives, they all have difficulties and big challenges that they've experienced when they were very, young, and that makes them a certain kind of person. Like we call it capable, empathetic or strong or resilient, or so yeah, we I guess education sometimes try to shelter our children, and sometimes, and but everybody will go through what they need to go through, and I'm sure your dad didn't want you to experience that, but here you are now doing such a human thing, talking to people. And we call it we in Buddhism, we talk about the people that not surviving people that have passed on, the family, but their successors, so that you're carrying on the legacy, because life is eternal, and we believe in like energy is neither created nor destroyed, right? So whatever your dad moved, whatever your dad could not achieve, you're passing it forward, but that's going back to your dad's life, and he's somewhere, I don't know where,
Yeah.
enjoying everything that you're doing. So you're succeeding and creating and adding value to his life. So it's something to be celebrated, and we succeed them, and we carry on their legacy, because I feel like my parents are the same way. They did the right thing. That's part of being Indian, is doing the right thing. The question is always, what should you be doing? Did you do this? But not what makes you happy. That's never the question that was asked. And my parents did their best to like give us what we needed materially. And but somewhere they were I feel like they could have done so much more, and I think my sister and I have both, then just decided to not value money and not value what other people value, like getting married, having children. And we've just like both gone in these unexpected ways, but we're both happy.
Oh, completely. Yeah. And linking what you said slightly earlier in that was with about people going through trauma, is the way I describe it in the short version, the elevator pitch, is that my dad passing was an anchor point. That is the point I feel in my life where things changed, the trajectory I was on, because I used to be quite egotistical. I was never like a bad person, it was just, I was kind of a dick. That was the problem. I was a know-it-all. I used to think I knew everything, and I just acted like that, and I was arrogant about stuff. And then with that happening to me, with that going, you are no more special than anyone else, as in everyone's special, but you aren't immune to these horrible things that can happen to someone. I mean, my grandmother passed away a year before my dad, then my dad, and then my uncle the year after, all in slightly different ways. So it was quite a big few years for me, and it really, shook me in a really important way. No one should have to go through unpleasant things, you said, but you learn the most lessons from those things. And when you make the mistakes, I know my dad passing away wasn't a mistake of mine, but you learn from either other people's mistakes or you learn from your own mistakes to get stronger. And I know we need to sort of wrap up a little bit here, but you're going to have to come back on, because we're going to have to, you're going to have you on again. But I thought I'd ask you this one last question before we kind of wrap up fully. And then I'm definitely going to have you on, because we're going to have to talk about loads of other stuff. But you spoke about with Buddhism about how people see the perception of things, and that you can see the ocean from your apartment window, which is great. Megan loves the ocean and things, and I mean, I love the ocean too. We both love the ocean. I don't know why she likes water. I hate it. No, it's we both very much enjoy it.
It's the Pacific Ocean too, so different
amazing.
ocean.
So one of the things the way I've grown to perceive the world, and individuals, be it human or animals or plants or anything like that, is I kind of view with the energy thing as light. I just view, obviously, energy can never be lost, only ever redirected and things and changed. It can never be just destroyed. So I perceive life in itself, in air quotes, is just to see it visually or to your core is to see light, is to see the light of a human being alive, the light of a cute dog or a tree or anything. And I wondered with yourself, do you perceive the world maybe as light? Do you perceive it more so as an ocean or a current or something? Or do you, in a metaphorical way, perceive it as something else? Because I got the impression, just from what you said about being able to see water, that you would see it more as an ocean. But I'm very intrigued by what you have to say about that. And then we can, after that bombshell, try and wrap up.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I want to join the Church of Mike Burton. I don't know. I'm not one of those people who sees light or sound, or some people are psychic or stuff. Honestly, I don't. I just have the ocean. I need nature. I realize that. I grew up in Delhi,
Yeah.
which is like a huge city, the most polluted city in the world. And it was when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s, it was still like green. It was a green, and there's, and my neighborhood still is quite green, and there were peacocks and parrots, but it's since then has become like just, malls and, buildings and just so populated. But I had these early childhood experiences where I would be, we would go to the Himalayas and like go to the mountains or do summer camps. So I have a very profound connection with mountains, and I had not seen the ocean until very like, I don't know, I might have been in my early 20s or late teens. I'd not never seen the ocean because Delhi is landlocked.
Mm-hmm.
But when I moved to the United States, then I moved to Boston, which is on a bay, and then San Diego, which is on the ocean, and San Francisco, which is on the water. So I've only lived on the coast in America. So I've developed a relationship with the ocean, But I feel like there's a feeling of oneness with the environment that for me is energetically very potent.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a light or something, but this idea of oneness and this idea, and I remember that feeling watching a sunrise in this place called Triund, which is, in India, and, Himachal Pradesh, I think. Oh my gosh, now I'm messing my geography up.
You could always send me a message after, and I can include a link in the description just to make sure.
It's where the Dalai Lama sits, his, but this oneness with nature, something bigger than yourself. And it's the same feeling that I have when I'm looking at my scroll and chanting Namyo Horenge Kyo, and it's this feeling that things are bigger than you, because sometimes you feel small. So I think I experience like energy as like small or big and free or constricted. So it's more like a body feeling. And I think it's the same thing with like listening to somebody. Like if I'm just having a conversation, and I think it's been tricky with Zoom, that when you're, when I'm just listening with like, oh, I want to know what the next thing I'm going to say. That's just hearing, not listening, like you so beautifully said. But sometimes you're listening to somebody and you can take their whole self in, and you're just like, there's no boundary between you and that other person.
You tune into their vibe.
You tune into their vibe, and you can feel not just what they're saying, but what's in their soul. And it's that oneness with another person or oneness with the environment. I think that's what I experience as like the yummy energy. And that's and when I just feel like small, or I feel like, oh yuck, or why is this? I'm too old, it's too late. Why is this person being like that? When I'm just like, the word is like, I'm just like, I'm just not, I just don't feel good. I don't feel magnanimous. I don't feel big. Like that's when I like know something is off. So it's maybe more of a body sensation, but I wish I saw colors and stuff like that.
Well, I'm a very visual person. I mean, I wore a nice, very bright coloured t-shirt as well to evidence it a little.
It's very nice. It's very nice.
Wearing pajamas on the bottom though, so not quite as cool.
Yeah.
But I mean, it kind of threw you in the deep end with that wrong question at the end without any real prep. But it's one of those things. I'm a very visual individual. I mean, I do podcasts, so I'm multi-sensory anyway. But I'm quite a visual. So whenever I speak about things, I always have a visual metaphor. But there's no pressure. Well, I'll ask you again when you come on again, and maybe the answer would be slightly different. Obviously, you didn't give a wrong answer, obviously, but it's like it's always intriguing hearing what people think about that, like whether or not you'd think you're more of a tree, you perceive the world, or a forest, or maybe even a blade of grass in a meadow, and everyone's just kind of moving in this equal ground and things. Whatever. It's I love just hearing people's speak about their perceptions of life and everything. And you've put so many eloquent thoughts to my listeners and to myself today. And we've only just scratched the surface. So we're going to have to get you back, delve right in without the introductory stuff and get into the real deep stuff. So as we wrap up here, because, you're a busy individual, you've got a lot of stuff to do. I wonder if you could tell people, I'll put a link to your website below, and we'll talk again. We'll continue to talk over email, and if there's any other things you want to link in, I've made a note about where the Dalai Lama is to make sure, just in case you haven't got it right, I'll put that in the description.
Yeah, it's McLeod Ganj, and it's Triund. I just can't remember the state. I believe it's Himachal Pradesh, but I could be wrong.
That's completely fine. You can't know everything in a podcast, unfortunately. That's why people like my show notes so much, because I always make sure I put details in there.
Show notes are the best.
But please, before we finish this up, let anyone know where they can find you, and if you have any sort of final statements and things for the listeners before we go, really.
Yeah, sure. You can find me on my website. It's not the best website, but whatever. It'll give you an insight into me, and it's www.radhikarao.org. I imagine that'll be in your show notes, so I won't spell it out. I'm on Instagram at like Radhika Rao 77. I'll, share that with you too. I'm not much of a I don't like social media isn't like how I'm always plugging myself, but I guess Instagram, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. And I'd love to work, across. I do a lot of work in creating places of dialogue and, in professional settings. Like I work with doctors, and how doctors interact with patients. I work with a police department as well. I work with, in tech, I help people like do presentations, but also have difficult conversations in the work context. I'm really passionate about people talking to each other across differences. So, if you want to look me up professionally, I'd be happy, as long as it's Zoom or remote, or, somebody wants to pay for me to come to another country. Like, hey, I'm up for that. But yeah, you can look me up, and my performance updates are there as well. Sometimes I'm lazier about them, but yeah.
And
I'm
also
constantly doing improv. Yeah.
And also, obviously, you're a theatre actress, and also you're in a couple of series as well on Amazon. I think Strings Attached and Hiraeth. Is that how you pronounce? I'll put link.
I think it's Hiraeth. Hiraeth. I don't know. It's a Welsh word.
Oh, okay.
It's a Welsh word that means longing for something, for a place that you've left. It's about immigrants.
Oh.
But it doesn't have another. And I thought it was like Urdu or Persian, but so I might be completely mispronouncing it, but it's a Welsh word. And it's about longing for a place that you've left.
That's beautiful. Amazing. Well, I mean, I'll include details of that in the description, as well as you also mentioned to me, shout out to the podcast Buddhability, because I listened to a bit of that before our conversation to just vaguely brush up my knowledge in some manners and things. But, I really appreciate you spending your time speaking with myself, and, the listeners are going to love it so much. So just thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes.